Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Be Real. I'm Tara.
And I'm Sherry.
And today we have a couple of guests, which I don't think we've ever had more than one guest on the show before.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So this is
welcome.
a monumental day for us in the studio.
Right.
So we have Hector and we have Juan. Please introduce yourselves and tell the listeners who you are.
Of course. Well, I guess that I'll start by saying thank you for having us today and like opening this space to get real about mental health and Latino community and all the amazing things we have been granted the possibility and the opportunity to work on and engage with. So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Colombia. I came here about 3 years to do a PhD in applied social and cultural psychology. It has been a wonderful experience. My work has mainly focused in, and I'll try to put this, avoiding technicalities and like
Thank you.
complex terms.
Layman's and all of
Like,
that.
in a nutshell, I'm kind of figuring out how to get Latino men to go to therapy.
Oh,
Right. Yeah, us too.
that's what a great platform.
Yes.
I love it.
So after many years of, being a mental health provider, mainly in the context of trauma within family and community context, one of the things I have come to realize is that what individuals framed as often as perpetrators do not necessarily fall in the category of, psychopath or like mental health disorder or having a mental health disorder per se. It is more what I have found having great difficulties, especially for men, to name their emotions, to deal with those emotions, to express vulnerability, to reach out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then, like walking along with them, I found out that, of course, they were doing a lot of harm, but the harm that they were doing also was reflected upon themselves. So this was like a vicious,
Cycle.
never-ending type of cycle. And yeah, I came across the podcast through my good friend Hector, and of course, love it like right away. And I hope today we get to share a little bit more about like these topics and like whatever else you find interesting or you feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
we
you
like
so
that
much.
goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
Thank
Nice introduction.
No
What a
pressure for you.
professional.
No
I know.
pressure for you.
Very
Go.
simple. I like simple to the point.
All right, welcome.
Something that he did not mention, we both do global health.
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Hector Peguero, born and raised in Puerto Rico, half Dominican. My dad is Dominican. Also a applied social and cultural psychology student at Florida International University. As Juan, we're in the same cohort. Well, you're a year more than me, sorry. I think, yes.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm older.
Yeah.
In school-wise, right?
Of course, yeah.
For
Yeah,
the
just in
record.
school, yeah.
Yeah. Then we do both, like I just mentioned, global health. And what I do mainly, it's studies related to the LGBTQIA plus community and their well-being.
Okay.
I do touch a lot on gender diversity and transgender communities in India. And I have a few studies here in Miami on Latinx
In
community.
India, how exciting is that? Wow.
And
Okay.
going back for a year in August.
Oh, okay.
Saving up for my
For
flight to
dissertation.
go
Yeah.
visit Hector over
Wow,
there.
I love the global discussion. That's very exciting.
I actually last year we spent several hours looking for a dress for you, Tara.
Oh.
What?
Yeah,
In the summer.
we
in the
went
summer,
last
yeah.
summer as part of a study abroad program
Right.
to work with the Public Health Research Institute of India, and we stayed for over a month, like working there. So part of our non-work related time was dedicated to a
Tara's
Tara
dress.
sari. Yeah, like a wonderful Mysore sari.
Oh my
for Tara's.
goodness.
Exciting.
Oh.
I'm looking for it. Where is it?
My grandmother would be. I have jewelry that Hector brought back for me, so I guess I have to. It's now my turn to go meet them there to finish the job. Yes,
She has to come this year.
I do.
She has a whole year to decide which month she want to go on visit.
Okay, there we go. All right, that sounds very exciting.
And-
Take Let's Be Real there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. On the road. We're taking it international. That would be amazing. And I have noticed in some of our stats, we do have listeners in Spanish speaking countries. And I have seen Colombia come up on there, Mexico. Where else have we seen? Peru. Peru has come up on there too. So now we can venture out a little bit further, wrap around the world a little bit more.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, exactly. And for anyone who's confused, Hector and I, we go way back. We're definitely Hector's considered like top 2 best friends, and my other best friend being over 1,000 miles away. So even though the irony is you and I see each other more frequently in foreign countries than we do in the U.S.
That is true. We do like to travel together.
Oh, very nice.
So I'll see him anywhere but Miami or Palm Beach.
Well, that's okay. That's more fun. Right?
I'm not complaining, except for how infrequent I see you. But he and I go way back, so this has been a journey that I've been very invested in for you, and by extension for Juan, because this is a very similar message that Sherry and I like to promote, which is we want diversity on our couch, so to speak.
Definitely.
And diversity, I think, has taken a meaning that some people don't think of when it comes to the therapy space. So men taking up space in therapy, men of color taking up space in therapy, immigrant men, and that avenue. So specifically working with Latino men, I think, is a phenomenal avenue to spend a lot more research and energy in, because exactly of the phenomenon you speak to, Juan, is we see consequences, right, of men, families, people, women not being taken care of or taking care of themselves. And if that's all we see are consequences and we just want to fix those, like Sherry and I are not fans of Band-Aids. We're not fans of programs that don't dig in and ask questions that we may not want to ask. So I guess I'm really curious as to what your research has told you in terms of, I guess we can leave it pretty open. Like, what has your research told you, or where are we leading? What directions are we looking at?
Well, I think because I have been kind of keeping things broad, not only because I think also like mental health and well-being are cross-cutting and are linked to so many outcomes, you know, like in different dimensions or levels. I have done like some research related to sexual health or Latino sexual health, or how they understand sexual terms, for instance. Like, what's the first thing that comes to their mind when they hear the word sex? And particularly for that study, which was a qualitative study, a content analysis, still under review, soon to be published. One of the things that shocked me the most is that one of the most common answer was like 4 or 5 characters long, like penis and a hole, for instance. Yeah. And this is coming from a college student, probably between like the median age of that study was 23 years old.
Okay.
So we're talking about a highly educated man who has like a lot of resources to his disposition, but probably has the sexual health literacy of an 8-year-old, you know. Like that incapacity of kind of naming things also becomes a barrier and shapes the way we experience things. So that's one of the things that kind of struck me the most. On that study, we also asked them about sexual empowerment. We wanted to know what made them feel empowered or not, because, you know, there are a lot of assumptions out there about men being already empowered and ready. And what we found is that even though some of them felt like, you know, they feel pretty comfortable about themselves, there's a big portion, a big chunk of them that don't. And, you know, like issues like body image came along. Like they are really concerned about their weight. They are really concerned about their muscles, their abs, but probably they're not voicing these concerns and yet engaging in really unhealthy type of relationship with themselves and also like behaviors and habits and so on. So that kind of things have been showing us how these ideas about masculinity, specifically for men of color and Latino men, are outdated, and that there's a whole generational shift, which is like pushing for these categories that, as far as now, are like dichotomous or kind of binary, black or white. They're no longer explaining the way people like understand their like identities and engage with those identities. So I think that's pretty cool. And my work, it's oriented to kind of like bringing more, not only attention, but helping them name these things and expand their understanding of these things. And like finally understanding how that process kind of impacts the way they experience life, like not only in terms of mental illness, because I also think that therapy and mental health should not be framed only in terms of deficit or disorder.
Absolutely.
Correct.
I would say, I know we've had that discussion many times, right? That's definitely our belief. Like, not everything is just mental health is just like your physical health, right? So it's just as important to have that that precursor and that understanding of it. And I wanted to know about, when you're doing your research, how much you get involved in the whole family dynamic of the Latino culture. I come from a Cuban mother, but raised by an American father, and Cuban mother, American father. So I wasn't raised totally in the Cuban way, but I do know a lot about how they perceive their boys. So tell me about that in your research.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now that you say it, I think what I have been trying to do also, and I think it kind of answers like a huge gap in the current landscape of literature, is that the research that has been done has been focused on specific factors and effects, but like they lack a systemic perspective. And we know that there are multiple factors like across levels, and like their interaction, their complex interaction ends up like producing a specific like behavioral outcome. So one of the factors within all these systems is family, for sure. It's a critical system, but at the same time, when it needs to be framed culturally. So in the literature, the way Latinos, like the particular way Latinos engage with their families, is being described as familismo, and characterized by that tendency to put others, like the family interest before the individual interest, the lack of boundaries, the difficulty to address specific issues related to mental health or sexual health. And sometimes, particularly for mental health access, how it becomes a barrier to mental health seeking behaviors, because Latino families, we don't talk about that. Right?
Oh, yeah. That's my need to talk over you right now. So that's where that comes from, my Spanish side. But the idea is that in our home, we don't, if you make a problem, then it becomes a problem. We're not allowed to discuss it, because it wouldn't be a problem. It's your fault. You brought it up. Now it's a problem.
It was okay when it was in the dark.
Right.
You didn't need to bring the flashlight here.
Yes.
And if you bring it up, you make sure that you keep it within our family.
We don't talk to other people about
We don't want
this.
them to know. Like we have in Colombia, we have a saying, los trapos sucios se lavan en casa. Like the dirty laundry is always done at home.
Like, so the Americans say, don't air your dirty laundry. Right?
There you go. Something like that. So, like that often becomes a barrier, because, individuals, they don't feel comfortable reaching out because they're going to get the stigma that's already associated to mental health, but also the backlash from the family. Probably you've seen the movie. I'm a huge fan of animation.
Okay.
So Encanto,
Oh,
which
yes,
was
I
like
love that movie, yeah.
released a couple of
Uh-huh.
years ago by Disney, and of course my favorite character was Bruno.
Oh,
Right? Which
Bruno,
was
yeah.
and the whole theme about not talking about
Mhm.
Bruno. I think it kind of captured the way the intersection between the stigma associated to mental health and those family dynamics that
Right.
sometimes become like when these two factors kind of come into contact, they become a trap and a barrier for people to seek out for help, and of course to receive the help. It's kind of tricky because at the same time, Latino families provide a lot of support.
Yes.
And
Absolutely,
provide like a
right?
lot of
Family,
emotional
you mean within
Within
the
it,
family.
right.
within the
We
family.
keep it within the
To
family, right?
those that identify as them, but add sexual and gender identity to that.
Oh,
How
no,
difficult
then we push that out of
yeah.
the family. Oh, yeah.
That makes it a little more difficult for those that sexually or by gender identify completely different.
Sure.
For for example, me as a gay man was more difficult to express how I felt at home because of my dad's machismo.
Oh, I was going to ask about that word. Okay.
You
I'm
know?
glad you used the
And
word.
he can define machismo a lot more than me.
Not because
but-
I identify with that script. Let's
Correct. Yeah.
okay.
Exactly.
The record is straight.
And how a person from the LGBTQIA community feels in a, let's say, Latino community and trying to navigate their identities.
Right.
Why? Because of a social script that we have already.
For sure, yeah. Well, and I think in the average American white society, right, that's been taken over a little bit better, right? We've taken that on. The
There's
gay
more
populations.
fluidity. There's more fluidity with that, right?
Right.
There's been a lot more room to safely explore
Right.
what crossing boundaries looks like, what opening up those
Right.
those
Wherein-
channels of communication. Where you use the word social script, which I think is exactly on.
Yes.
If we deviate from the script, then we have to adjust, and that's not going to work for us. We want to identify as supportive people. We want to identify as family-oriented people. When we stick to the script, that's exactly what we're able to do, and we can maximize that. We can capitalize that. That is our strength. Anything other than that is seen as deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas other cultures have been able
Right.
to see what might be deficiency or weakness is actually another way to navigate strengths and
Right.
turning that support into something action-based and something that can be moved through. But there's not so much of a safe space to navigate those until now we're really like trying to shake the tree at the
Well,
trunk.
and I think because the American culture is more of a you go on and live your life and we live our life. Like, you know,
Yes.
we have a continuum. Nobody stays, most people don't stay after 25, right?
Mhm.
That's if you're living in your home, your parents' home and you're 35, we look at that like, whoa, what's wrong with him, right? But for the Spanish population, that's just, hey, come here. We need, we all live together. We take
Mhm.
care of each other. So if that's all happening in your home, it's a little different than we sent him off to go do his thing. So that's his life.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right?
I think that mostly happens, in my opinion, with heterosexual individuals in that
Okay, right.
what I call in that world.
Yes.
Not with sexual minorities.
Okay.
Like for when you live in an environment where
Right.
you have to fight
Yes.
who you are, how you identify, who you want to love.
Right.
The first thing you want to do is
Share it with
get
your family.
out.
Oh,
No, get
oh,
out
get
of
out.
that environment.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Like at 18, I was like, okay, I'm gonna study, and this is my time for me to like go somewhere else
Yes.
and live my
yes.
life.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You know, and again, it's my personal experience, but
Right.
our research has also shown that because of the traumas, the stigmas, the
Mhm.
violence, rejection that LGBTQIA live
Right.
within their families and around the community, in their
Right.
community, they tend to
Leave it.
leave those spaces and create
Right.
their own
Mhm.
spaces, their own families.
Right.
Which is seen as a deviation from what the norm was, but for exactly that reason, right?
Right.
Like we're not going to follow the heteronormative and I don't need to challenge that within my own home. I can create that safety. I can create that exploration for myself as well, which is why, like, especially with, I work with LGBTQIA communities, and a lot of the work I'm doing especially when I'm working with young people, is establishing what boundaries are and that they're not offensive. Because that's a really hard lesson to take on and appreciate, is that boundary setting when it comes to family is not offensive by itself, but how ingrained that lesson has become, that message has become.
And it happens globally. It's not just in the US. So for example, the community the transgender community called Hydras, in India, specifically in Mysore, where I go to conduct my research, they go through the same experiences.
Oh, yeah.
They have problems at home with parents, family, the community, specifically the community, because of religion, cultural backgrounds.
Right. And that's another community that's very family oriented. Right.
Definitely.
And they have to leave. They leave their home, they leave their families, and what they do is that they find these trans communities that have someone in charge, and that is a mother in charge, and that's where they live.
Yes.
Their own communities.
That's so fascinating.
Do they go through a lot of struggle? Yes.
Of course,
like many people in different cultures and different backgrounds. But it's interesting how us, as part of the LGBTQIA plus, end up creating our own safe spaces.
Yep.
Right.
You know,
and you figure
away
that
from
over time,
what is
this is
family.
the same kind of thing. This is why people leave communities that they don't belong, or they don't feel they belong in, right? Where that's where gangs come from. That's where, because when you don't feel that you belong,
correct.
No matter what's going on in that family or that dynamic, you're going to go out and find something that you belong to. Sometimes things that are good for you, and sometimes things that are not. But that need for belonging is so intense that and for people to understand you is a huge thing, right? So if you're not feeling it from your own family, that's a huge even if it's I'm not sure. So were you I'm not sure if my family will approve of me, or was it they definitely will not?
What, in your experience, what are safe spaces that heterosexual cis men create to feel, accepted within, I don't know, a community or a safe space, space?
I think there are like several things to that. Like what Sherry was mentioning before about, kind of in her experience, many backgrounds like come together and merge to create this new cultural identity in which you have your Latino background, but you have your American background, and you're like diving into mainstream America. Like that, I cannot stress enough the importance of understanding the acculturation process of our communities, and that most of our communities, even though they are born here, that might identify with values of other cultures that do not necessarily align with the culture within the culture they are kind of developing. So it was for me like I was like another study that we conducted this time with Latinas. Like we wanted to explore, like through a content analysis, we wanted to explore like their perceptions around work-life balance. And I was really shocked to find that they like consistently quoted Dolly Parton.
Working 9 to 5.
I was expecting like it was like don't be too busy making a life that you're too busy to live it, or something like that. I cannot remember the quote, but I was like, oh my God, I was expecting probably Selena or Christina or even Celia, but I was not like not Dolly Parton, But it kind of speaks of this like cultural, like diversity, like the multiculturality of the United States, and how complex it is to navigate like these different frames. So, of course, I think that endorsing one identity or the other might expose you like to different challenges.
Absolutely. Right.
So of course, like even within the family, I think that even though cisgender heterosexual men do not get that, like pressure, or might feel more embraced like by their family systems, they're only embraced as long as they behave in a certain
Exactly.
way,
Right. And
and
that's
and they comply with specific roles, and
cultural
they
religion
are,
says.
exactly. And
Yeah.
you will be shocked to kind of see how lonely people feel.
Yeah.
And I think the Surgeon General has been
Yes.
consistently making a call to, hey, we're going through a loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
We need more screening. We need, like, because of course we know in our cultures there are no boundaries. We're all like on top of each other or whatever, for good
Literally,
and
yes.
bad.
Uh-huh.
And here it's more, it's a more individualistic culture.
Yes.
The boundaries are more clear. People do not remain within those systems for long time. So
Right.
that create a different set of challenges. So I
Absolutely.
think both, kind of, but part of our research also is aims kind of to avoid the one size fits all
Yeah.
type of
Yes.
solution, and even framing, because it's just men.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Right.
men, but within the men spectrum, there are a lot of ways to be a man, or to feel a
Absolutely.
man,
Sure.
or
Right.
to many identities.
Right.
So
Right.
that, I think that creating those spaces is still challenging for us. Like, for instance, um, now that you mentioned the machismo script, for instance, considering that there's only one way to be a man, which is being a macho, or something like in contrast to that, well, there's a whole universe between those two poles, but we don't know how to
Exactly.
feel like that, like we don't know what's between, and we don't know how to engage with those things that are between. So I would say we're not making a good job at like crafting those safe spaces. We are being really challenged, but by this generational shifts and like the recomposition of societies due to migration and like more like big scale phenomenon. And it's urgent that we start like looking into our systems and kind of assessing if the way we are present, like the type of support and opportunities and dynamics that we are providing through them, are meeting the emotional needs and kind of fostering the well-being of like the members, like if
That's why
they
we
are
have so many
thriving.
negative health outcomes.
Of
Yeah.
course,
Right.
of
We have to
course.
start.
We're
We
not
have to start
defining.
young, though, right? We have to teach kids from a young age that it's okay to have feelings, and it's okay to, the man up term needs to go away,
Yeah.
right? Like the idea of don't act like a girl, and if you're crying, right? So I mean my main work is trauma, and I deal with a lot of teaching men and women, right? That we just don't understand emotions. People in general, right? Men tend to stick with anger as their go-to, and women stick with sad. And they all want happy, right? But finding somewhere in the middle is really hard to get people to see that there are other emotions. So
And then how that expresses, because if you look the charts, because that's the thing, because when we talk about men's mental health, because we are underreporting, because we don't want to say that we're depressed or anxious or whatever, like other symptoms or disorder, we tend to think that we're okay. But then when you look the figures on deaths of despair, like, overdose, suicide, automobile crashes, or like, men are number one in all those charts.
Yeah.
So
The
that
pressures,
unresolved
right?
trauma, it's coming out
Absolutely.
one way
Absolutely.
or the other. It's just that it's not being framed as something related to mental
Right, because
health.
they come in and say, I have anger issues. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, so let's talk about that. And it almost always turns into something from their childhood or something that they just don't really understand, something outside of that word anger.
Yes.
They don't understand emotional regulation. And it doesn't, I mean, we all have all human beings have a challenge of emotional regulation and how to actually, we don't have a dial, right? Nobody said, here, this is the level you should be at, right? So figuring out what that is and what's going to work in your relationship is a challenge for everybody. But I do believe that, unfortunately, we've taught our men that of any culture, we've taught them that it's not cool to cry. It's not cool to be upset other than be anger. You
Yeah.
can have anger and
We
you can punch somebody
reinforce-
else, and that's okay. That's how you go punch a pillow. Go punch a wall.
Yeah. We reinforce those expressions. And then for women, we also reinforce a different set of expressions
Right.
to establish this normalcy where there's an entire spectrum. There's a full rainbow of emotions.
Right.
And we're so limited. We're so stunted. Our EQ, as you were speaking to, our emotional intelligence quotient is so low.
Yeah.
It's dysfunctional. We're not really getting that social emotional learning, which I know is a bad word in this state. We're not encouraging.
Shame on you.
But our generation, I wasn't given like all of the skills possible. If I was to have a child, I would have to be relearning my own EQ to pass that on to my children.
We still don't give the tools.
But
I don't
that's
think we
a
still
tall
give
order.
tools
No,
at all.
that because it's hard.
That was my
right?
little
Even in
like
preschool.
snide at our state. Yeah.
Right. Even in preschool, right? You get sent home if you hit somebody. If you get sent, I'm not saying let's all punch each other, but there's understanding. Nobody sits down and says, "Oh, why? What are you upset about? Like, what's
Right.
going on here? Right? Why are you feeling that way?" And yeah, if you're talking to a 4-year-old, they may not understand, but they may understand it's too loud in here. They may understand that it's too much for them. They're overwhelmed, or
That
they
happens
do
in
have
schools
language.
too, but teachers don't have the tools. Teachers are not
We can't
trained
ask-
either.
they're
And then
not.
that,
We
it
Can't
will
ask
be-
them to be either.
Exactly.
We can't,
so
right? And then
much.
when you put us in there, right? Like in the roles both of us have been in the past, they chop you off at your knees and say, "Oh, you can only do this."
Yep.
Right? So that's the biggest problem. Everybody talks about how mental health is a huge crisis, but we all know that. On TikTok, everybody knows what's a narcissist. Everybody knows what's manipulation. Everybody knows all these things. Like, I have clients that will come in and say, "Oh, well, I'm here because I have codependency issues." I'm like, "Okay, so what does that mean?" Right? And so they're going off of whatever TikTok told them. But nobody taught them when they were a kid about how certain things should be, right? How, even because us as adults, we don't really understand either. So figuring out what that could be like without being enmeshed or being on top of each other with the poor boundaries, and finding that balance.
Right. So I'm also hearing from what your research is telling us and what we're experiencing in our rooms as well, is that we're at a really big transitional period that may not end if we continue to be this melting pot that we brag about, right? The idea is that that transition won't be ending. We'll continue to absorb new ideas, new philosophies, and melt
As we
them.
should, right.
Exactly. And melt them with the people, the ancestors that precede. So what do we keep from collectivism? What do we keep from individualism? What do we reject? What do we maintain? What's healthy? Which is a very subjective question.
You have to have the answers right now.
The four of us right here solving it all.
Right.
Of
Exactly.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well,
But we're inching at it.
Yeah.
So I guess my big curiosity too is, what are, for right now, for the data that we're getting now, for the lives we're living now, what are our directions? What do we do to support each other? What do we do
Right.
to maintain what's healthy and improve what isn't?
What do we need?
Yeah,
What
I
do we
think
do?
before, because I feel that's a lovely question. Like I do feel that we should spend more time framing things, from a non-deficit lens, and kind of
Yes.
giving ourselves space to envision where we
Right.
want to be and how to get there. But before that, and because you just said it, I think something that needs to be put on the table is that we were hit by the first big pandemic of the century
Sure.
recently.
Yep.
You know, like,
Yes.
and we haven't still come to realize like all the effects and the consequences that
Absolutely.
living, you know,
Agreed.
like
Worldwide, right?
worldwide,
Yeah.
like, you know, so
We're underestimating you.
lots of lots of us, we lost people we cared
Mm-hmm.
for a lot. We were not able to grieve there properly
Mhm.
because
Absolutely
you know some bodies were not handed to their families because
Right.
you
A
know
lot of
they
people didn't
couldn't.
have funerals. They couldn't because of gathering or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So and that changed for good and bad everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
like, and one of the things that came along with it is like this awareness of mental health being something really important. You know,
Absolutely.
and that also there are new ways or there are like new approaches to that. And
Right.
because we were in survival mode and everyone was
Yes.
trying whatever worked for them because the ones who prayed, the ones who, you know, love alcohol or use it to cope, well, they did that.
Yeah.
Like the ones
Right.
like
They used their coping skills, good or bad, right?
everyone
they found
used
them.
whatever they had, you know. So but then in that process of trial and error, we find that some things, for instance, telehealth was a great tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, and a lot of
Yeah.
us shifted to, and you know, I have been a counselor for many years and probably I haven't transitioned to this modality, you know, so I cannot say that I'm going to champion for it. But what I have seen in the type of data we're gathering and
Right.
like what we're listening consistently is that a good portion of people switched and they are really happy
Yep.
They
with
really
what
are,
they
yeah.
have like going on. In a city like Miami, you don't have to commute for an hour back and forth
Right. To
to
go
meet
20
your
miles,
therapist.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
like some of them, you know, they have told me things like, you know, if I need a break, I can just pause the camera, you know, put the camera off and kind of catch my breath and come along because I'm not there yet with my therapist. And that's good.
Wow.
Yep.
You know,
Okay,
like, you know, I don't want to cry in front of her or in front of him yet. It's okay. You will
Right.
find, you know,
You allow
so
for that, yeah.
like in a
That's good.
really intuitive way.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel people is finding ways to make these things remain, you know, and become
Definitely.
part
Right.
of their lives. But I think like kind of acknowledging that we're still grieving both collectively and individually,
Right.
and that mental health, like one of the big truths that was like laid out is that we need to make mental health a priority. Is something to start, like it's a pivotal point and kind of a starting
Sure.
point for whatever vision we are gonna
Right.
build like
Absolutely.
in the future.
Well, that brings to what you and I were talking about before was the idea of changing the systems, right? Because systems would not allow you to do those kind of things when it wasn't mandatory or necessary, right? That was the evil. No, we are not going to do video therapy. That's just not okay.
It's
right?
ineffective.
It's
It's not
ineffective.
good.
That's not appropriate. We need to see your body language. I mean, there's a camera there, right? But you and we need to see all these things, right? I need to be able to feel it in the air. Whatever it was, the reason we didn't want to pay for it, we didn't want to whatever. So this opens up the idea that systems are so messed up. I'm a big person to say that systems are messed up. This opened up some holes in their theories about why they couldn't do things. Right? Here's a proof. Absolutely we can do this. Absolutely we can see people across state lines and no one's going to die. Absolutely we're not going to cause more problem by seeing somebody on video. So that means that there's all these other ideas that they've been saying that are right, that we can't go against, that are not right, that we have to go against, right? The idea of, I've never, and forgive me, I know this is the wrong time to say this, but when we talk about championing diversity, the way that it's been done in a system perspective makes people angry, and it doesn't actually teach anybody anything, right? It doesn't,
It's
forcing.
because who it benefits.
Exactly. Because if you're teaching me, that I have to every year take a cultural diversity class, but it's pre-taped that some old white guy made in his basement, does not provide
Doesn't show
me
diversity.
doesn't show diversity, right? It's just saying you should be aware. Okay, but can you come and give me some useful
Yes.
information, right? Like for you guys, you're providing useful, helpful information, right? And that's what we need more of.
That is still very difficult to find. Why?
Right.
Because the information, for example, in social media that we are providing, TikTok, Instagram,
Yes.
it's not information that is scientifically
Of
proven.
course, it's
It's not
most of the time.
empirical.
Most of the
It's
time,
not
it's
peer
not
reviewed.
peer reviewed.
Oh, I love those words. Oh, sorry. I love those
Yeah.
words.
These systems are just misinforming people.
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely. I agree.
Completely misinforming people, and are not following science in
any kind of way, right?
Any kind of way.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Definitely.
Although I do feel that they hold great potential.
Yes.
Like particularly TikTok for sexual health,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
becoming massive. Because of course, one of the things our adolescents and mainly emerging adults, which is like 18 through 29, which is the population we work mostly with, is that they are invested in learning how. Show us how. We need skills, and we need like the real deal. Sometimes that real deal, it's not gonna come from your instructor, like within the classroom environment. And what we have found, particularly for Latinos, is that even though they associate sexual education exclusively to the like educational setting, to like the actual program that it's being given either in high school or in college, the information that turns out to be effective, like in terms of their sexual health outcomes, is the one that they are receiving from informal sources.
Yep.
Of course, right?
So,
Yeah.
okay. So
They're by
when-
choice, right?
Yeah.
The
But-
bus and
Exactly.
school
The
bus.
TikTok channel, the school
Yeah,
bus,
yeah.
the
Right.
bathroom, like
Right.
my peers, whatever. So that stresses the importance of actually start collaborating and like
Harnessing that.
disseminating knowledge that we know. It's like
Right.
evidence
That is
based or
in
whatever,
perception.
but in a way that can reach broader audiences and in a way that it's meaningful to them and in a way that it's useful and
Right.
not just like this anatomic the like the
exactly.
old way of like
know what?
showing the picture
I'm
and
going to
terrifying
go back
them.
to me being a 49-year-old woman, right? So when I was in high school, there was a banana and you had to put a condom on it, okay?
Of course,
Now,
of course.
today, you'd be in big trouble.
Yes.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
Yep.
So
Not even videos.
not
Can't
even a
even
video,
use a
right? I couldn't
video.
even put a
No
banana
euphemisms,
Yeah.
on the
no
table
nothing.
to symbolize anything. So I
And
think
as a
that-
man, let me tell you, that's really important. And most
Right.
of us don't know how to do it.
right, and that's
Like
why
that's
I'm
a truth that I'm just
Right.
gonna lay there, even
It's
though
so
we play it like I got it,
Yeah.
it's so simple. Like of course,
Right.
we have no
There is
idea.
a technique to it.
Yeah, of course there is.
There is a technique to it.
But we're just flipping a coin, like let's
Ah,
try
it's
it
the right
or
way.
whatever.
Oh, shit, it's
Yeah.
upside down. It's too late.
Exactly. It's too
Right,
late.
right.
Yeah.
It's too late, right? And then you're embarrassed to say anything. And then if it's your first encounter, then you're even more embarrassed. So it's just the concept of these people, meaning children, adolescents, when you get to a certain age, we want people to be to be able to understand this, right? But then we also want to, again, chop them off at the knees. No, you're too young to understand this. You wouldn't understand. Well, I do know that it doesn't look exactly like a banana, but at least the banana is more effective than nothing, right?
Of
Yes.
course. Of
So,
course.
that's what I'm saying is we've dumbed down what we want to teach our children, and we're not allowing social emotional in the state of Florida anymore, which I mean, what are we doing? But so this is the idea. Like, I have friends that used to go into the schools, teach HIV education, teach sexual health. That's not allowed anymore.
No.
So I'm not sure why the parents and the government is trying to really ruin this for everybody. But this is not just a cultural thing now. This is everybody is getting lumped into this
Mm-hmm.
mess of not understanding.
Yeah, definitely, and I feel that that's also like pushing us, like the ones who want to have these type of conversations
Right.
and like believe things should be different, to explore other spaces and like other
Right.
channels, and like that's
Yes.
why also we decided to, like, for us is way more meaningful that this message gets to people that might be needing to listen to this and
Right.
feel
Yes.
identified and feel
Absolutely.
inspired to talk, like to open a conversation or
Right.
to reach out for support. That
Right.
sometimes getting this message on a paper that no one's gonna read, to be fully on, like
Exactly.
that is gonna
Right.
lay, because
Lay
there
in the
are,
archives
of
somewhere. Right.
course, like just a bunch of papers that are being pumped
That's a huge
every
problem in
day.
research.
So,
Yeah.
Like, who
Right.
sits down and
Accessibility.
reads
Exactly.
a
Right.
research paper?
Right, but then we talk so much about having data and having research based and being to fidelity of the which all makes me want to barf. I'm sorry, because we don't actually, like, we just say, okay, this is how it's going to be because this said it, but we don't follow it in a way that makes sense to the person you're working with, right? Let me just give you another piece of paper, and then to see if that really follows it, and then nobody, like, you forget the emotional part that goes with it, the part we're trying to teach.
We don't know how to apply the
yeah.
information that we're putting in paper into
Right.
practice, into
Exactly.
community,
Right.
community services,
Right.
into organizations,
Exactly.
into programs that should be helping people in mental health,
Right.
physical, emotional health.
Exactly. Well, and since we brought up the state of Florida, and I like to cause problems, but we we live in a state where we ban books, and we live in a state where if you're a little child, if you're, let's say, 5 or 6 years old, and you have 2 female parents, right? Or you have 2 male parents, what is it going to hurt the rest of the class for somebody to read a book about something like that? Why is it okay that only a book about what really doesn't exist anymore is nuclear parent, right? Why is that okay, but I can't read a book about Johnny
Making changes, and changes lead to work,
right? But that's the thing, is that we need to understand how it affects those children who get bullied because their other kids are not taught, first of all, to have respect for each other, but second of all, to understand that families are all different, right? We don't live, and I don't know that that's really existed in a time period other than the 1950s that we have created an illusion about, because the nuclear family hasn't been around forever.
Right. And what was going well with that?
Nothing. That's because people died at 40, and so it was no big deal. Now you die at 40 in your divorce, and then you get remarried, and it's okay, right?
Reborn.
Right? And you do whatever you want. But ultimately, the idea is that those things, like, we're going backwards. So what I would like to see is more going forward, and in making changes, that's the only way we can do it, is to say, look, we have to understand that we're all hurting, right? And if so-and-so is being bullied because he has 2 moms, why aren't we making everybody understand that that's not a problem, right? Yeah. Why is that a problem? Because he has 2 moms, right? So I think he has 2 loving people that care for him, and I think that's more important than what sex they are.
Yeah.
No, and I also think that at the same time we are coming across what we expected in terms of, men not being able to express feelings and everything that we have talked about. I want also to be clear that we are seeing, along with this, other men that are talking about emotional connection, that are talking about psychological safety, that are talking about, sexuality through emotions and feelings, and so there's also like a good portion of people, a group of people that is pushing for new conversations and new terms, and like opening new ways for people to experience every dimension of their self. So,
I agree. I've seen lots of platforms for Black male therapists to have their own symposiums. They have their own conferences. And that's an incredibly valuable topic to absolutely be protected in that space.
Absolutely.
And likewise with, I imagine, Latino counselors and therapists to have that space to promote the learning that is there. That someone, in my shoes could never experience or understand. I can empathize, I can listen, I can provide skills and coping and all that good stuff. There is nothing that will connect me to the level that those groups and those topics can really foster. And I am to that point, very grateful that work is being done on the front lines alongside with all of the research that's being conducted. Right. So maybe in closing, if everyone's okay with that, because it's such a rich conversation.
Right? We could go on for a long time.
And if we were organizers, we definitely could have done the part 1, part 2 to this. But as we asked you to show up for a conversation, you guys showed out. So thank you so much. I will never miss an opportunity to speak to positive psychology. And a former professor of mine, Dr. Chris Peterson from Michigan, when we're talking about moving away from deficit thinking and moving towards growth mindset. And I won't say positivity because I think we're still moving away from like that toxic positive therapist space.
Reframe.
We're reframing. Where we're moving away from pathology and into what is it to have the absence of mental illness, the presence of mental health, the absence of mental illness. And that's what Dr. Peterson was really about. And that my hip tattoo that says other people matter is absolutely, I think, pivotal to his work and what we're speaking to here. If we're looking at future directions, it's tackling the epidemic of loneliness,
absolutely,
addressing growth mindset, and rejecting deficient thinking. English.
Sometimes it's a challenge.
It is. But looking into that strengths-based approach, which
absolutely.
I'm a big
proponent of it.
Big advocate for 1,000%. So I thank you both 1,000 times over for being here.
Yeah, definitely. We would love to have you guys again. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, this room will always be open for you and your work, your ideas, thoughts, anything that's disruptive, anything that's, supporting where we all deserve to be, I think is exactly why we're in this room together. And we would love to take the show on the road to Indiana.
Yeah. I would love to. That would be
Shouldn't
awesome.
have planted that idea in my head.
Right?
There you
Exactly.
go.
I'm ready.
Exactly that.
Yes.
Exactly that. But for the listeners, you guys know where to find us for Let's Be Real, Sherry and Tara. For you both, if anyone wants to get involved in your research or hear more about you, where can they find y'all?
They can find me at hectorpeguero.com.
I think you can find me in academic Twitter, Juanscape, Juan SCAPE. Also check our lab webpage, CCHI Lab. At FIU. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm not huge on social media for some reason, but I have been, receiving the
You're
call.
engaged.
Of course. I'm feeling more comfortable. So, just stay tuned. Probably more channels.
Okay. Well, you have a great presence, so that's good. Yes.
Love it. Absolutely. And we'll offer that up for folks in our show notes and in all of our Instagram and TikTok goodness. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you all for listening.
Yes.
And we'll catch y'all next time.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Bye.